The following program is a public access production. Comcast is required to provide time on this channel and make it available pursuant to franchise agreements with the communities we serve. Comcast is not affiliated with the following program or the producers of public access programming and is not responsible for the content. The following program does not reflect the opinions of Comcast or its affiliates.
Greetings. My name is Dr. Waddell Brooks, Sr., your host, and this is Community Forum. We're very fortunate this evening to have with us an exemplary person, Dr. Thomas Rudd. He's a Lake County coroner, and we're going to be talking about the current coroner events. Good evening, Dr. Rudd.
My pleasure.
We're very happy that you've taken time for your busy schedule, literally, to be with us on Community Forum. To talk about current coroner events. First of all, I'd like to make a couple of announcements before we start to make sure that I get them in before the program ends. Ladies and gentlemen, we have with us a black man, a Moor, by the name of John Hanson. John Hanson was the first president of the United States of America. I mention this because it's not required by the state of Illinois that African American history be included in all the textbooks. And in our textbooks tells us that George Washington was the first president of the United States. Well, George Washington was the first president under the ratified Constitution in 1787. But before our Constitution was ratified, we had the Articles of Confederation. And the Articles of Confederation, the elected officials elected John Hanson to be the first president. And this was 1781 to 1782. So I want you to click on John Hanson, Hanson, and you'll find him on a $2 bill. He is in there. As a matter of fact, I have it circled here on the $2 bill. So until we get the correct information, as a matter of fact, I may just mention one other thing. Native Indians were the first settlers in this country. All other people came here were immigrants. So as a matter of fact, if we check further, we find out that Africans were here before the Indians. Now that's some time ago, that's thousands of years ago, but Africans were there and they taught the native Indians all they need to know. And it wasn't until the Caucasians or the white settlers came, white immigrants came here, brought diseases that almost wiped out the Indians. And so that's the chain: African Americans, Native Americans, and then the white settlers, white immigrants come. Now, we'd like to say there's a lot of shootings in this country, and we're going to talk about them. By the coroner is going to talk about them as much as he wants to. But I have one here. This is Morgan, Howard Morgan. Was shot 38 times in Chicago by Chicago policemen, 4 different policemen, because he was going the wrong way on a one-way street. Howard Morgan survived, and he is now, he was acquitted by Quinn, Governor Quinn, gave him a pardon. And now he is suing for his to get free of all charges now, because he still has the felony on his record. But by the grace of God, Howard Morgan survived the 38 shootings because going the wrong way on a traffic ticket. Now, just recently, yesterday, we had the University of Cincinnati an officer shot another African American, and the state's attorney said that this, and I may quote him, that the prosecutor said the officer purposely killed the African American and should never, quote unquote, never should have been a police officer. This was at the University of Cincinnati officer that shot this because of a missing front license plate. This happened on, well, he was indicted Wednesday, that's today, on a murder charge. Ladies and gentlemen, we are praying that things are changing, it's happening all over the country, and we just have to stay prayerful that we can correct the activities of the policemen that are shooting African Americans unarmed. Dr. Rudd, many people in Lake County know you. Are you the first Democratic coroner in Lake County?
No, I would be the third that I know of since 1979. I don't know what was before 79, but Dr. Keller, Mr. Yancey, and myself are Democrats.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about your background and about the coroner. I know you mentioned Mr. Yancey, who's the former police officer. He was not a pathologist, you know. But tell us about, first of all, how you got involved in pathology. Why pathology?
Well, when I was in medical school, the most important course you take in your first 2 years is the study of disease and health. And of course, pathology is the major course that discusses that. And that's your foundation for treatment. You have to know what is healthy and how it becomes illness or disease, the pathology behind it, and therefore you know how to treat it.
Okay.
And that's constantly changing. And so you must know your pathology very, very well to be able to adapt with treatment purposes. So when I was finishing medical school, I wasn't absolutely certain what area to go into.
Okay.
So I figured maybe I should take an internship in pathology, and that would give me some more understanding of health and disease. And as a result of doing that, I decided to stay and do a residency in pathology for 3 more years, and that's how I became a pathologist. I had no intention of doing it until I actually spent time in it and found that I loved it.
You mentioned pathology and also nuclear medicine.
Yes, I did a fellowship in 1978 through 79. Nuclear medicine at that time was under radiologists, internists, and pathologists. And I won't explain why, it's just a little too complicated. Okay. However, that is imaging organs of the body using radioisotopes. It's a form of radiology, and I did that also. So I have 3 board certifications: anatomic, clinical, and nuclear medicine.
You also mentioned about the different manners of death.
Yes. One of the things that a coroner or medical examiner does when somebody dies is they have to determine the cause of death and the manner of death.
Okay.
The cause is multifactorial. Virtually any natural disease process, which is how most people die: heart attacks, strokes, cancer, etc., etc. But there are also categories that are not natural. We have homicide, suicide, and accidents. Those are the manners of death. So if somebody dies of a heart attack, the cause is a myocardial infarction, and the manner is natural. Okay. And if somebody hangs themselves, that's a strangulation, and the manner is suicide. If somebody causes the death of somebody, that by definition is a homicide. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a murder. It's just that homicide, the definition is a person killing another person. The intention belongs to the judicial process and not the pathologist.
Now, not all cases then are prosecuted that are homicides, though. Why is...
That's a tough question. I think we have a case right now. When I first came into office, we had a case of Darren Hanna, who had a manner of death labeled undetermined, despite the fact, from my studying the case, it was clearly a homicide. And so when I got into office, I quickly studied the anatomic and clinical findings of his death and labeled it a homicide.
Okay.
The state's attorney's office chose not to accept making a decision on whether or not they should try to find out if it's justified or not. The state's attorney said that he should turn it over to the federal government because he wants to make sure that it's not a biased opinion being made by him. And that is now 3 years later, probably more than 3 years later.
Is that the Department of Justice?
Well, yes, yeah, the federal government. He turned it over to the federal government. And so for 3 years, my decision on manner of death of homicide has not been acted on. I don't know why.
But you are a professional pathologist.
I'm board certified, yes.
Board certified.
Correct. I'm one of the few pathologists in the nation that has been certified 3 times. I had board certification originally in 1978, and then 20 years later, in 1998, I took the test, and in 2008, I took the test. So I've taken the boards every 10 years. There are very few pathologists that can say they've been recertified twice and certified once upon leaving residency. It wasn't usually done. I thought it was common until I worked with about a dozen pathologists, and I was one of the few that took recertification. The others didn't. It wasn't mandatory, it was voluntary back then.
I think it was November 5th, I believe, 2011, I guess, when Darren Hanna was killed.
Correct.
You know, by 6 North Chicago policemen, you know. But this is now approaching 4 years now. And
Yes.
now the mother, if she filed a civil suit, now what's the difference between a civil suit and a criminal?
Well, a criminal suit is something where somebody deliberately kills a man for a premeditated murder. In this case, law enforcement caused the death of Mr. Hanna, and there were extenuating circumstances where they went to arrest him. So by law, they had the right to arrest him.
Okay.
However, whether or not the homicide is justified or not by the police has yet to be determined. For instance, if it was a criminal suit, somebody went in there to rob Darren and shot him. That would be criminal. However, if the state's attorney had gathered a grand jury, they certainly could have come across and said, you should indict him because we think it is a criminal activity and it wasn't justified. So it could end up being a criminal activity if the state's attorney had moved forward with a grand jury and see what they said, but they decided not to.
Maybe because he's new in the position, then he didn't want to take action.
Well, it seemed like he sort of indicated that he might have felt that a third party would do a more neutral job. Let's put it there that way. I think that's what he was saying, that if he had taken it on, it would have been viewed as biased. And so he decided to call in the federal government.
Just about the prosecuting attorney in Baltimore, there was no, she had not been in office very long, and she didn't hesitate.
That's correct.
That she filed, indicted, let's see, 6 people, and well, 3 African American and 3 whites. You
Correct.
know, she didn't discriminate. You know?
No, she acted very quickly, and she received a lot of criticism for it, but she also was praised for it.
Okay.
We'll have to see what what happens with the courts to see if she was right in doing that.
But you may say that it's the state's attorney has the final say so
Yes.
on whether a case is prosecuted or not.
Yes, he does. He has a lot of power, and he's really not accountable to it except for re-election every 4 years.
Wow.
Prosecutors can do almost anything at will and not worry about ever going to jail for it.
Can they be sued?
They can be sued,
Federal government,
you know, in regards to putting people in jail, they can be sued civilly, but I don't know of too many prosecutors that have deliberately done things wrong, and there's many that have done that in this country that have ever gone to jail.
I mentioned about the case in University of Cincinnati police officer where the prosecuting attorney said the officer purposely killed the African American, and he further stated he should never have been a police officer. That's a prosecuting attorney. It's very aggressive.
Very brave.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Obviously has a lot of evidence. If we look at the individual that ran away from a police officer, I forget, somewhere out east. I don't know if it's, was it in South Carolina, where a police officer pulled somebody over and he ran from his car and he just pulled out his gun and shot him. And then he ran to get his taser to make it look like the individual he shot was fighting with him with a taser, and it was all caught on film.
Okay.
And the mayor and the police chief was very brave. They fired him on the spot and indicted him. Okay, but probably only because it was on film.
People in the country are concerned, and I guess the legislators are concerned too, because the people that are shot in the back and so forth, unarmed, are African Americans. It just appeared that way.
That's a tough question. It's a tough issue to analyze. As we well know, the crime areas tend to be in poor neighborhoods, be it black, white, or brown. Okay. There are a lot of poor white neighborhoods where this happens also, but it's not as much as in black neighborhoods. I think the whole concept of policing has to be a little bit different. It actually has to be drastically changed. Okay, when I grew up as a kid, if I did something wrong, for instance, I don't know what made me do this, but I saw the mailman delivering mail, and he had that little green box where he stored the mail. So I went and got myself a little screwdriver, opened up the lock, and I delivered the mail for him. And of course, the neighbors reported that. I was trying to do a good deed. I thought I was helping them out. And of course, I broke a federal law. And the police officer was called. He came and picked me up, but he didn't take me to the police station and book me. He took me to my mother's house, to my mother. Okay, he took me home. So the point I'm saying is that police knew the neighbors, knew the district in which they worked. They interacted with people. Many of them, especially in Chicago, lived in the neighborhoods that the district policed. So they interacted with the community. I think that needs to be brought back. For instance, the city of Chicago mandates that police live in the city. Doesn't mean they'll live in all the areas, especially some of the areas that are considered quote bad. But they are mandated to live in the city, and I think we need to get back to that, where if we can, we hire law enforcement that lives in the community, shops in the community, goes to church in the community, plays in the community. Police need to interact with the community, and I think we'd have less of this. Right now, police, like in Chicago, are actually an occupying force when they go in, and they're viewed negatively. Now, I know the mayor and the police chief in Chicago are trying to put more people on patrol, more on bikes, more on interacting, and so they get to know the community. It's going to be a long, tough road, because we went from where everybody knew each other to this state. It's going to take time to get back to that time.
Otherwise, we look like we may be involved in a police state where the citizens just don't trust the police at all.
That's true.
That's a terrible state to be in.
That is. Because look what happens. Somebody gets killed and nobody wants to talk.
Right.
I think there's a 19 or 20-year-old father who lost his son because the bullet was meant for him.
Yeah.
And the child died.
Yeah.
And he refused to talk. Okay. And there are reasons for that, because revenge. If you do speak out, you're gonna pay for it. So the police have to afford some sort of protection if they expect citizens to finger somebody, as to what has happened. A lot of work needs to be done on both sides.
Is it mandatory to have a coroner's report, or is it up to the family to request it?
In terms of homicide, accident, and suicide, there's almost always a autopsy and a report. Some suicides, of course, are clear, a hanging or death by train or something like that. Sometimes you don't necessarily have to do an autopsy, but there will be a report. Natural deaths generally do not come to us for autopsy, for obvious reasons. They died of a natural death. Okay. But accidents, suicides, and homicides should be investigated by us. Most of the time they'll have autopsies, and they will have reports. For instance, if we do have a suicide, we want to find out were there drugs involved. So we'll do a drug screen, and if they're positive and they hung themselves, we can conclude that they did have the drugs and an autopsy was not necessary. Okay.
Coroners are should be professional. They should be independent, and it should be non-political. Correct. Right?
Yes.
So
obviously.
Okay.
Okay. Well, that's tough because we have to elect them.
Okay.
So by definition, they're political. I mean, I ran as a Democrat.
Okay.
I'm proud to be a Democrat. In fact, I'm an old-fashioned Democrat. I'm a Roosevelt Democrat. Most of our listeners probably know who I'm talking about. But the greatest president of the 20th century is Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Wasn't for Roosevelt, this country would be communistic right now, because the economic depression of 1929 under the Republicans created havoc in this country, and 25 to 30% of this nation was without food, clothing, or shelter.
Okay.
And it was Roosevelt that saved this country through government action. But point is that by definition it's a political office because I have to run for it. Now, I ran on the premise that we would change this to a medical examiner's office. And within, I think, less than a year, I made a proposal to the powers to be of the board to convert it to an to an appointed ME, and it was turned down because I had certain criteria that they did not accept. And that is, if we have appointed, there's 4 or 5, but the most important is that if you appoint a medical examiner, a physician who's board certified in anatomic pathology and forensic pathology at the minimum, he has an open-ended contract. That means he's like any other employee with the county, whether it's a secretary or a deputy sheriff. They can work as long as they want, as long as they follow the laws of human resources. That was flatly rejected. They wanted to put the medical examiner on a 4 or 5 year contract. The problem with that is that when that contract is near to be renewed, he can be squeezed into maybe interpreting some finding a little differently, because word might sneak back to him that if you don't do what we say, you're not going to be back. Now, if you've got a wife and 4 kids and they're all in grade school and high school, and you've got to take them out of school and find a new job, you might bend. Or if you don't, you might be looking for a new job. So I said it had to be an open-ended contract. Secondly, as I mentioned before, anatomic pathology and forensic pathology boards on entering the job, not before you're going to take the test. And most importantly, you don't answer to the state's attorney, and you don't answer to any other law enforcement agency like the sheriff. Okay. And then I also said that we should make sure that whoever we pick, that Dr. Jones, who is a pathologist, works with our department, and I would make the final decision of a large group of people that the county would sift through, and then they'd say, give us 3 or 4 or 5 candidates, and we'd pick one of the 5.
You mentioned accountability, though, but your budget, isn't it approved by the county board?
That's correct.
Do you have to report to them annually or something?
Or actually more often. I think we have meetings maybe every month or every other month in regards to how we're doing.
Okay.
I'm proud to say that in my first year of office, I reduced overtime by 33%. In my second year, I maintained that 30% reduction of overtime, but in addition, cut the budget by $150,000 in addition.
Wow.
That's almost 12% of the budget. So I cut my budget by 12% in the second year while maintaining the overtime budget reduced by 33%. So we are a small budget. I think we're about, it depends, 1.3 or 4 to 1.5 or 6. It varies. It's a very small budget, but we control our costs very, very well. When we got in, we instituted a documentation of when deputy coroners are called out so that they can't manipulate overtime. And I wasn't very popular, but we saved you some money.
I think you should talk with the mayor of North Chicago about their police department. You know, it's overwhelmingly addressed every meeting by citizens, you know, about the overtime, you know. But what about staffing?
Well, we're a very small staff. I think we're a total of 10 people total, not counting me. We have 7 deputy coroners that go out in the field and do the investigations.
Okay.
We have 2 administrative secretary staff, and we have a board-certified medical technologist running the drug screening program, which was never done before. And we have 1 chief deputy coroner, so that's a total of 10. We also have despite the fact that we're a small number of people, we have a very diverse community in our workforce. We have my chief deputy coroner is Hispanic. My senior deputy coroner is female. The woman who runs the drug screening program is female. I have a regular deputy that's female. I have a secretary who's black. I have a deputy coroner who's black, and I have 5 white deputy coroners also. So we have a diversity within our small organization, which is very difficult to do when you have a low number of people.
Well, no wonder you score so highly then at the cultural diversity forums I have each year.
Yes, that was pretty good.
You always.
I enjoyed watching that tape, despite the fact that several minutes were removed. I was wondering if we could ever get that back. Okay, but that's another story.
Right. Well, we try not to edit them. The only thing, knowledge and leadership of a physician pathologist. How, you know, we talked about that, I guess, before, about how the knowledge you should have. Of course, actually, you do not have to be a coroner. I mean,
you don't have to be a physician
or pathologist
to be a coroner. Here's the problem. There are only 400 forensic boarded pathologists in the nation. Okay, there are about 10,000 regular pathologists. Okay, like me. The reason the coroner position was developed is that there are thousands of counties, far higher in number than the number of pathologists available.
Okay.
And even if every pathologist ran the coroner system, you still wouldn't have enough.
Okay.
All right, so they had to make an exemption so that somebody could determine the manner of death. So they said it could be a layperson. Now, if the coroner is a layperson, he still must call in a pathologist or physician to do the autopsy. Let's make that clear. Just because you're a coroner and you're not a physician or a pathologist doesn't mean you can cut a body. Okay, you can't. All right. I, for instance, am trained to do autopsies, and by law, I'm not allowed to. Okay? So they had to make this a layperson's position. One thing I find I disagree with, it requires very little education. High school degree and no felony.
Wow.
That's all. Now, where can you go right out of high school and make $125,000 a year?
Okay.
That's a lot of money for somebody without a college degree or any training. Now, luckily, a lot of people have run for this office that are lay people, and they did have some training. Some of them were deputy coroners. Some of them were medical technologists. Some of them were paramedics. A lot of them came from the medical field, but they don't have to. The optimal way of having it is to have a medical examiner, but again, too many counties. Now, there are systems in this country where you can change it in a different way. For instance, in Georgia, the medical examiner is based in Atlanta, and he runs all the counties of the state of Georgia. So if there's a death in a small county where there is not enough autopsies to be done, so they don't have a board-certified pathologist or forensic pathologist, the deceased is either brought to Atlanta or they send out a forensic pathologist. That would be the best way. So if the state of Illinois, unfortunately, is financially in trouble, if they really wanted to make sure that every death investigation is based on sound medical science by a professional MD, they would have a centralized ME office and run all counties. But that would take money, and the state's not exactly drowning in green right now.
Okay, to say it, lightly there. There's also a National Association of Medical Examiners.
Right. There's only, it's a national organization based, I can't remember now. Oh, actually, I think it's in Georgia, Emory University. It consists of about 400 forensic pathologists nationally, and it's a select group.
Well, there was a program called 48 Hours recently, and I think you were one of the participants.
Yes.
In that 48 hours. And I think in the short time we have left.
Oh, really?
No. I want to give you plenty of time because everyone probably didn't see 48 Hours, but it was in the newspapers and so forth. But now they can have direct, a viewing of your take on 48.
Well, first of all, let me just say this. If anybody wants to watch the show, they just go to the 48 Hours website.
Okay.
And they look for the title of the show, which is called Blaming Melissa. So you can watch the whole show.
Okay.
Basically, long story short, after dealing with Darren Hanna, I was requested by a defense attorney representing a defendant called Melissa Kalazinski, who was convicted sometime in 2011 or 12, I think it was 12, of killing a 16-month-old child at a daycare center.
Okay.
Upon investigating that case, and I spent a long time on that, 4 or 5 months reading trial transcripts, I could clearly see that, first of all, before even looking at the slides, just watching the video of the interrogation and just reading the transcripts of the interrogation, that she was coerced into making a confession of murder that she didn't commit. And that coercion lasted over 9 hours.
Wow.
And
continually.
Well, they'd leave the room and let her sit there. But she was in a room she could not leave for 9 or 10 hours. And so she sat there, and for 8 or 9 of the 10 hours or whatever it was, she said 79 times I didn't do it. Now, the police follow a way of interrogation called the Reed technique, which is an antiquated technique that really, when you look at the science behind it, it's worthless. It's useless. And even so it's worthless and useless, they broke their own rules of that interrogation technique, which states after 60 minutes of denial, you stop.
Okay.
They didn't. And they continued to go on. So I watched that, and we'll get to the pathology.
Okay.
And I thought, this looks like something out of Red China, or the Soviet Union, or North Korea, or North Vietnamese. Okay, this looks like torture. So in getting ready for the case, I found a textbook called Skeletal Trauma.
Okay.
Okay, and this textbook I was looking at to see what a skull fracture looks like, but it also says in the subtitle of this pathology book, identification of injuries resulting from human rights abuse and armed conflict. So I went to the chapter, and I'm going to read you a brief excerpt, okay? Because we think of torture as waterboarding,
Okay.
beatings, gouging, whatever. Now, this small section I'm going to read comes from the United Nations Convention Against Torture. Let me read what the United Nations says, that it was adopted in 1987 and was accepted by the United States government. The term torture means any act by which severe pain or suffering, whether physical or mental, is intentionally inflicted on the person for the purpose of obtaining a confession.
Okay.
Couldn't be any more clear that Melissa Kalazinski was tortured. The convention says so. The United Nations was accepted. Now, that being said, I went and looked at the autopsy findings. Lo and behold, what they said was acute trauma, make a long story short, was old trauma. She did not suffer an acute hit to the head, this child. This child suffered an old injury that we know is documented in the daycare center on October 27th. The pathologist that reviewed this case totally blew it. This was also brought out in testimony in court, okay, so it wasn't anything new. Okay, it was new to me when I looked at it, so I called in Dr. Jones. We issued another report saying the same thing, except slightly better, and I issued it May 8th to the state's attorney, personally delivered to his office. When the show came out on February 28th, a reporter for one of the papers went to him and said, "What about this report that Dr. Jones did?" State's attorney said, "I never got it." I gave the copy of the front of the cover letter that I sent the state's attorney, gave it to the reporter, and sent him back.
Okay.
He said, he kept making excuses. Well, I didn't think it was complete. Then he said, the state's attorney said he called me. Well, I studied 2 months worth of phone records on my personal Verizon phone and my personal phone here. I never got a call from anybody from the state's attorney's office. Okay, so all of a sudden he says it's not a complete report. So with these findings of obviously showing an old injury that Melissa couldn't have caused because she wasn't employed, plus we've got a coerced confession, we've been the defense attorney has been fighting in court. June 10th of this year, unbelievable news occurs. The father of Melissa gets a phone call and states, and it's stated to him anonymously, that there are x-rays of Benjamin Kingen that would sort of indicate that the trauma was not acute. So I got a call from Mr. Kalazinski, and I immediately called my deputy coroner who's in charge of the x-ray machine. I asked him to go in the back and see if there were films on Benjamin Kingen. He called me from the back room and said there is, and I said print all of them up. Now here's what's interesting. The films that were given to the defense, as well as the prosecution at the beginning of the trial, were only 3 images, all of which could not be read. They appeared allegedly out of focus or weren't taken right. So the defense attorney contacted the prosecutorial attorney and said, "These images are terrible, give me another set." They said another set. Same thing. So just before trial, Paul DeLuca, the defense attorney at the time, talked to Christine Bishop in front of the Judge Shaines and said, "I need some good x-rays." And the prosecutorial attorney said, "These x-rays are worthless. Let's wait and see what happens when the guy in charge of the x-rays come back." All right. Let me show you the films. I have them here.
Oh.
And we're only going to look at the top films because it's the head that is the key.
Okay.
On the left, and I won't point with my finger, but maybe I will. On the left, this is the x-ray that was given to the defense and prosecution. And to those of you who are not, radiologists, that is a terrible image. Okay? That is a terrible image. This image is unreadable. Lo and behold, when we go back on June 10th, and punch up the case, the good images show up.
Okay.
Right here. And what's key to this is this skull shows no skull fracture. And this is what the prosecution based its whole case on, that they saw some crack in the skull, and they said that's an acute trauma. But they never submitted the tissue for microscopic analysis to confirm it. Well, their evidence is now non-existent because there's no skull fracture. And we have 2 board-certified radiologists who have confirmed this, one of which is a major university professor of neuroradiology and chairman of radiology out east.
You have to hold this. Okay.
Okay, so no skull fracture. We're done with this. So now we have totally destroyed the prosecution's case of no skull fracture.
Wow.
Here's the key. They withheld this, whether deliberate or not. This material was in the computer as raw data. And what they were providing the defense attorney, as well as the prosecution, because whenever you give something to the defense, the prosecution wants it also, they were giving raw data to the defense attorney and expecting him, I guess, to be able to manipulate the data to get good images. Well, these images were given to 2 board-certified pathologists who couldn't do it, nor could the prosecutorial attorney, Christine Bishop. She said they're worthless. They couldn't do it either.
Wow.
That's withholding evidence, whether it's deliberate or not. That breaks the Brady law. That's automatic removal from prison and a retrial. And yet our state's attorney is conducting the most elaborate, long investigation of this and not releasing Melissa. I don't know why.
Well, doesn't the state's attorney has a committee, a board that he created to look at these type of
This is also
things?
interesting.
We had retrial.
Right. Correct. This is also interesting. As you know, and as many of the citizens know, we're one of the worst counties for convicting people of murder when DNA shows that they're innocent, and all 6 people that were convicted of murder also had coerced, tortured confessions. Okay, so the state's attorney comes in, says we're going to have a wrongful conviction committee, whatever you want to entitle it.
Okay.
Okay, it's a committee that we're going to review cases. Melissa Kalazinski, the Benjamin Kingen case, is the only one he refuses to submit. The only one. And he sits there and says, I, and a single individual, has reviewed the data and it's not worthwhile. Despite the fact that his evidence is totally wasted, blown away. There's no evidence of an acute trauma. All right? We said it pathologically, and now we've said it radiologically. The only thing they have is when they open up the head of the child and remove the skin, they see a little line less than an inch long, which is most likely a normal anatomic variant, a growth plate. And they the pathologist who saw that committed a mortal sin in pathology of not submitting that tissue for microscopic analysis to confirm the fact that that in fact is a skull fracture or a normal anatomic variant of a growth plate. He refused to submit it. That is a mortal sin. Because you're sending somebody to jail for 31 years, don't you think, don't you owe it not only to the defendant, but to the child who died?
Okay.
No, he didn't do it. And he won't submit it to the his review board. Why won't he submit it to the review board? What harm could there be? He formed a review board of people he knows, and this review board has absolutely no power over him to force a retrial.
Right.
What is he scared of? I don't know.
Now she's been serving how many years?
I'm sorry?
She's
been given 31 years, and she's been in jail since 2009.
Okay.
So she's never been released, never had a criminal record, never had a problem in grade school. She herself, in fact, was raped prior to this death of this child.
Wow.
And what's interesting, she was held captive in a room after the rape just like she was held captive by the Major Crime Task Force. So you could see where she would want to get out, and she would sign a confession. Now, to the public who says, I would never, ever sign a confession of murder if I didn't do it. You and I are old enough to remember Charles Lindbergh. He was an American flyer who went from, I think, the coast of the United States to Paris without stopping. He unfortunately had a child, was kidnapped and murdered. 200 people came forward and said, I did it, without police interrogation. So can you imagine what you would say when you are coerced and tortured into a confession? Of course you'd break down. How many armed forces, men and women that have landed behind the lines in all our wars have gone before a camera and condemned us for what we do? You would think they would be the strongest. Okay, there are some, like Senator John McCain, despite what Mr. Trump says, who did suffer horrible torture and yet did not do that. But everybody has a breaking point. Anybody can be broken if you do the right type of torture or coercion, whether it's mental or physical. Remember, the United Nations said you'd get a confession using mental torture. It is torture. And we need to change that. What we need to do in this county is stop using the Reed technique and get the state's attorney and law enforcement to get together and decide to use a new technique. Okay, there's a new technique out there called PEACE, P-E-A-C-E. And I'm not going to run through the letters. I could give a lecture for an hour. But it is a technique used throughout Europe and countries that have very strong laws, where you interview a suspect as if you're interviewing, as if you're a reporter for a newspaper. In other words, you prepare yourself and you question the defendant, the one you're interviewing, and you write down in great detail what they've said. Then you go back and review what they said, because when you lie, you have to add all these things up in your mind, and you're going to have to remember them. And that's where you slip. So if you say, well, what happened on this day, and you take down all the notes, then you go back and re-interview them, and they start making mistakes, then they start slipping, then you know they're lying, and then you can go forward and maybe put them under arrest. But we got to stop using the current technique, because the current technique is pure torture.
Tell me this, though, the pathologist that you mentioned that he stated he erred something.
Well, this is what's interesting. After I analyzed the case, and by the way, I didn't rewrite the autopsy report because by law I'm not allowed to. I submitted it to Dr. Jones, former ME at Cook County, who works for us. She wrote a brilliant analysis of what happened. And after I submitted it to the state's attorney on May 8th, I decided to maybe talk to the original autopsy pathologist. So I wrote him a letter. And I sent him Dr. Jones's report. And I asked, would you meet with me and discuss this cooperatively and like colleagues? And I'm not going to ask you to change your mind. So we met. We spent about 2.5 hours. We argued back and forth like two professionals do, and I thanked him for coming. Then I waited 2 or 3 weeks, and I said, well, you've read Dr. Jones's report, and I gave you some materials. What do you think? He wrote back and said, I made a mistake. Signed an affidavit.
Okay.
That he made a mistake. 14 months later, probably with the state's attorney's office twisting his arm, he wrote a letter saying he retracts that. Now, he doesn't say it in an affidavit.
Okay.
All right? He just writes a letter. An affidavit's a lot more powerful because you could be prosecuted for perjury.
Right.
Okay? But he doesn't sign an affidavit. He just writes a letter. And it took 14 months for him to change his mind. I'm just wondering how much pressure the state's attorney's office put on him to do that, because I don't think he did it voluntarily.
Wow.
That's my personal opinion.
Wow. Isn't there a pathologist course that you can take online? I think Dr. John Manossick, does he teach a course online?
But here I could make a joke, but I better not.
No.
Yes, he's taught this course for 4 or 5 years, I believe, maybe longer. Yes, you can just go to www.medicalschoolpathology.com.
Okay.
And on there are a series of lectures brilliantly produced by him in
Okay. He's a brilliant man, though, sorry.
well, we don't want to polish his badge too much for him. Does a good job himself.
Okay.
Yes, but more importantly is this. This is a free course.
Okay.
There's no charge.
Okay.
And you can access it at any time, although it is live when he starts the lectures next week. I believe he's twice a week, 2 hours, starting at around 9 o'clock Central Standard Time.
Okay.
What's amazing, Dr. Brooks, is the thousands of people across the world who watch this and praise him. Okay, I go online and see this. And it's touching because there are a lot of people, especially women, who either leave medical school or leave residency to raise their children, who have written back to him, thanking him for this course that allows them to review the most important field of study in medicine, pathology. And because of this, they're able to refresh what they learned and are able to get back into the very rigorous course of becoming a physician. And he gets a lot of hosannas for this, and he does it all for free.
Wow.
So it's amazing that somebody can do something like that. And he's soon to become even bigger in terms of outreach because we've got him hopefully in contact with some of the powers to be that actually can put it on television as opposed to the internet.
Well, I mentioned we had a few minutes to go, and I want to make sure that you emphasize the Kalasinski case to people that have been a lot of wording has been in the newspapers and so forth on that, but you've been right on top of the case. But what about, how do you determine suicide versus murder?
Sometimes it can be very difficult. There are obvious ways of determining suicide in terms of, especially with hanging. There's ligature marks and stuff like that, and you obviously can analyze the scene and realize that it is self-induced. Because most of the time, if somebody, well, let's just deal with suicide. Let's say somebody tries to foster it off as suicide, and they set a person up to hang them. Okay. Well, first of all, if the individual is awake, he's going to fight. Okay, so there's going to be injuries. There's going to be defensive wounds and offensive wounds on the body, and somebody dies. Or let's say they drug him. They put him to sleep. They're having a party, and they put something in his drink. He falls asleep, and then they take him out and they hang him. Well, of course, we can do drugs. Okay, we can screen for drugs. Now, it doesn't. Usually, they would use a knockout drug as opposed to a recreational drug, and so we could do it that way also. You obviously have to look into the past record of the individual. Do they have a history of saying they're depressed? Do they see a psychologist, psychiatrist? Is there something in their medical record that indicates they're of depressive nature? If somebody kills themselves and they don't have any reason for it, they're not financially distraught, they haven't got a divorce pending, a child hasn't died, okay, they don't have a long history, yes, it can be clear cut.
Time is fleeing. I guess we're going to have to do part 3 and 4 on this, but it's always great having you on. You're very professional, you're very honest, and informational, and as they say in the Navy, you promulgate information very well.
Thank you.
Very eloquent, and I have to say, I want to thank you personally very much. You remind me of a friend of mine. We had a Consumers Credit Union, had a retirement for him by the name of Hal Coxon. He's the vice president of marketing there, and we had a a great time at in Gurnee there, Key Lime Cove, I guess it was.
I don't know that.
And we had a lot of people. We had the mayor of North Chicago there. We had the Terry Link, and the chairman of the board of Lake County Board was there, and of course Rita Mayfield and Reverend Arthur Gass, the president of the Black Chamber of Commerce of Lake County there, and we had they all spoke, spoke well of him. Of course, he got a great send off. So a great. He is. I mentioned him because he was the cause of my being on radio and TV. Really? He was the manager of the radio station and WKRS, and offered me the opportunity to host the program.
How long have you been doing it?
1990s, so 25 years.
I do a radio show too.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about that on another show. Okay. Right after 3 years later, I went to TV, and I don't know what I'd been doing if after all this 38 years of retirement, what I would be doing. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with the great Dr. Thomas Rudd, Lake County coroner, and we've been talking about current coroner events and all the challenging experiences that he's had since being a certified pathologist as Lake County coroner. This has been Community Forum. My name is Dr. Wardell Brooks Sr., your host.